and a former West Indian captain, Brian Lara. We also have Sri Lanka's greatest captain, the man who established the island nation firmly on the cricketing map with the World Cup win in 1996. A man who played hard, spoke his mind, Arjuna Ranatunga. And we also have two modern Indian cricket greats. One is arguably the best number 3 who ever played for us, some would say the world. Many call him the Wall, but for me, he's India's Mr. Cricket. Former Indian captain Rahul Dravid. And finally, a man who needs no introduction. He taught us how to win overseas, a man who till recently had the best record as an Indian Test captain. Ladies and gentlemen, Sourav Ganguly. Dada, I'll start with you. Dada also incidentally scored a debut Test ton, but those were very different circumstances. Dada, here in 2013, you've got Shikhar Dhawan, who's no longer a youngster. He's been through the grind of domestic cricket, yet he makes his Test debut and scores 100 against Australia of a mere 85 balls. He's now overnight at 185. Do you think that's because of the advent of T20 cricket and the kind of influence that T20 cricket now has on cricket all over the world?
See, I definitely agree that T20 cricket has an influence on cricket, modern day cricket for sure, and batsmen for sure. But I would just not give this credit for this 100 because of T20 cricket. I think Test match cricket is still the best form of cricket, and I think you need to show a lot more skills in Test cricket to succeed. And he did show it today. I watched his innings completely right throughout every ball, and he looked terrific. He had the time to play fast bowling. Although, yes, you can say that the wickets were slow. Australia is not the best bowling attack in the world. You can't get wickets in India if your spinners don't know how to bowl. You can say all sorts of things. But for someone, the way he batted today, there have been a lot of players in the past who scored hundreds in debut and who will go on to make hundreds in their first Test matches. But what stood out for me is the way he batted. And I think it speaks a lot about his mindset. And I don't think that's just got to do with T20 cricket. There are other players in the recent era who've played Test cricket, succeeded in Test cricket, and who are still a part of T20 cricket. But for me, it's what stood out was complete, take your mind off the situation that this is my first Test. This is where I need to play. This is what I want to play. Because as a player, you want to play Test cricket. You can play T20 cricket, you can be an important player in the IPL or one-day cricket, but it's the success. And today, Shikhar Dhawan, he had some outstanding performances in cricket. But today, I think he will go back home or to the hotel satisfied. And when everyone's eyes, players, critics, captains, coaches, he will go much higher as a player. Yes, as I said, as I started this topic, that there is an influence, but I think what stood out is his ability today, which will help him adapt in all forms of the game.
Brian, when you made your Test debut, do you think around that time players could have even dreamt of or thought of playing an innings like this at that point in time?
Well, I will. Are you hearing me, everyone? Yeah. I would say that the 100 today, even though I did not see it, I didn't admit it today, so went straight to bed. But obviously it had some relation with the fact that he's played a lot of T20. And looking back at all the players that scores quick hundreds now, not just on debut, the Warners, Chris Gales, Sehwag, these are very much attacking players. And these are guys that are big franchise players in the IPL or any of the T20s around the world. So I would think 20, 30 years ago, no one would dream about, scoring 185 balls. If you can get to 30, 40 and 85 balls, you'd be happy to carry on. But this is the way the game is going, and I think it's not just you're going to see exciting cricket from the batsmen. I think you're going to also see a lot of more results.
All right. It's very interesting because the man that Shikhar Dhawan has actually replaced in the side is Virender Sehwag. And Arjuna, I want to bring you into the conversation. We were talking about this backstage also. Virender Sehwag, you would normally think the way he plays, the way he executes himself out there on the middle, is somebody who's suited to T20 cricket, to one-day cricket. But the biggest impact that he actually had and has had so far is actually Test cricket. But if we look at his record, if we go by the numbers and the stats, since the advent of T20 cricket, Since India won the T20 World Cup in 2007, he played T20 cricket regularly for the next 2-3 years, so say 2010. After that, if we look at his form, it's been very dismal. He's averaging under 30, whereas earlier he was in the high 50s. Do you think somewhere down the line, subconsciously, playing T20 cricket in the IPL for the country has had an impact on somebody as great as Virendra Sehwag?
No, I'm sure it can happen. Only thing is you need to understand the way he came up. He batted at number 6 and then came to open. I'm sure that either Sourav or Asaruddin is the one who pushed him to open. Same thing happened to someone like Jayasuriya back in Sri Lanka. He was batting at number 7. Then we realized that we need to get best from him. Then we started opening with him. Only thing I see from 2020, apart from me, all these 3 guys have played 2020. I'm the only one who doesn't play 2020 and who hasn't played 2020. But what I see, when you play in the shorter version, especially the 2020, the people doesn't know the value of the technique. I think you take these three guys who perform well in the international scene. I can remember as a kid when I started playing for Sri Lanka, there were Vinsarkas, Gavaskas, Amaranaths, and it was very difficult to get India out even in 2 days. After that they had Rahul, Ganguly, Tendulkar, Lakshmans. It was a nightmare. I'm telling you, it was a nightmare for a captain to captain a side, especially when you come to India. But I personally feel now, if I have the 96 team against this particular team, I always say that we will have a chance of winning a test match in India. It has never happened, but for us to draw a series and go back at that particular time was the greatest thing. And we achieved that once. It was so difficult to get them through, especially when Rahul gets out, Tendulkar comes in. When he goes out, Sourav comes in. Then he goes out, Lakshman comes in. And it doesn't end up. So these are the sort of cricketers produced in India. I can't see that it happens now.
All right. Before I get to Rahul, would you have liked to play T20 cricket?
I really don't know. I might have played 20, but I personally feel that this is a game where we need to understand properly and balance it properly. Otherwise, it can affect the younger generation. That's my main worry. I'm not really concerned about the seniors, but when it comes to the younger generation, if they are more concerned about playing the shorter version, forget about playing the 3-day games or the 4-day games. That can have an effect in the Indian cricket in the future, or even Sri Lankan cricket or whatever the world cricket.
Very interesting thoughts, those. And Rahul, I'm going to pose that question to you, in fact. Arjuna said that he's struggling to find where the next Dravid, Ganguly, Lakshman is going to come from. Sachin, thankfully, still playing for us. Do you have those concerns?
Firstly, I'll make just a quick comment. I'm glad we gave Arjuna some nightmares, because after making us field for 952 runs, I'm still yet to recover from that. I still wake up in a cold sweat sometimes thinking about those 3 days of fielding in Colombo in the heat.
And I'll interrupt, because I was the short leg and he was at Silly Point. He still got some runs in that test match and I got a duck. And the opposition got 900 for 4 or 5. So
for 2 days, not a single wicket fell. It was an amazing experience. But to go back to your point, Gaurav, no, I think there'll be a different kind of cricketer. I think the game is changing. The game is changing. The players, the way they play the game is changing. It was interesting today. I mean, Shikhar Dhawan got that 100 and it sort of came up on the television screen as to the fastest hundreds by Indians. There was Kapil Dev on the list. There was Mohammad Azharuddin on the list. There was Virendra Sehwag on the list. I think there was Shikhar and then Kapil Dev again. What was interesting for me was that 4 of those scores actually happened before the advent of T20 cricket. And we're talking of the impact of T20 cricket. 4 of those 5 scores actually happened before anyone had actually played T20 cricket. So it's not that people weren't playing positively before. I mean, you look at, like Arjuna mentioned, Sanath Jayasuriya, or even Brian, the way he played, or Viv Richards before that. I think what's happening is more and more players are playing like that in a lot more positive manner. You had one or two players or the outliers in a team who would play in that particular manner. You look at the Indian top 6 or 7 today, and every one of them actually, if you put the field in to a spinner, put a mid-on, mid-off up, will go over the top. You know, when I started, probably Tendulkar and Ganguly against the left-arm spinners were the only guys who would do that. So that's what's changed. I think if you look, there were always players who played positively and who could score runs quickly. But I think you find more and more players doing that now because of T20 cricket. So it's going to be different. You'll find different kinds of players. You know, and it was great. It was great to watch Shikhar play. It was exciting. It was great fun to watch.
Would you say that, during your era, we saw a lot of pure batsmen come and exhibit their art? Batsmen who built in innings, batsmen who were patient. Patience is something that's synonymous with Rahul Dravid. Do you think those kind of batsmen we're going to get to see now in the generations that come through, given the fact that when you started your cricket, T20 was not even on the horizon, but now they're growing up and they're sampling their cricket through T20 as well?
You know, some may say, thankfully, hopefully we don't see people like you. It's bored us to sleep half the time, you know. But look, I still think you look at Pujara. I mean, Pujara is a good example of a young player coming through, I think, who's come through the ranks, who's, I think who values who's sort of grown up as a technician or as a test player, who's grown up in what we call the classical test format. But he's also increased his repertoire, and you can see that, you know, from the time that I saw Pujara as a young kid 5-6 years ago playing for Saurashtra against Karnataka, and if I look at the range of shots that he has today, you know, he's grown in leaps and bounds. So I think there's still going to be a place for the technician and the person. I mean, I think even to play positively, you need a good technique. I mean, Virendra Sehwag is able to play that he did, or even Shikhar Dhawan's innings today was a positive innings. But, you know, to get into some of the positions that he did to play positively, you know, requires a good technique. So you might not see that many people with a defensive technique anymore, but I'm still sure that, you know, there is a room and there is a place for it, you know, especially in Test cricket.
Arjuna, do you feel the two formats can coexist peacefully without impinging on each other?
I think you need to understand the value of Test cricket. If you can survive playing Test cricket, I'm sure that even for the shorter version, you might be able to adapt. And I'm sure that all the top cricketers produced in the world has adopted into the shorter version. But my major worry is the younger generation. I think when I'm talking about the 15 or 17-year-old kids who are playing junior level everywhere. I can take a clue from Sri Lanka. I think most of these younger cricketers are more keen on playing their shots, or they are not really bothered about concentrating on their technique. I think that's the biggest worry I go through. And they all prefer to bowl 4 overs and take a break rather than thinking of 20 overs or 25 overs for a day. I recently coaching clinic just outside Colombo, and I spoke to a 15-year-old really good fast bowler. He said, I love to play 20-20. I said, why? Then he said, I only have to bowl 4 overs. I think that's a concept adopted by this younger generation. That's something we need to address very quickly and divide that into 2 groups. For me, 20-20 is entertainment, Test cricket is education.
Brian, before I come to you, I've got a question for Dada. Dada, it's very interesting what Arjuna was saying, because, you know, after India won the Under-19 World Cup very recently under the captaincy of Unmukh Chand, I was speaking to one of the Under-19 players, and I won't take their name. That player, during the course of the conversation, asked me, Bhaiya, IPL mein kuch ho sakta hai. That was the first thought that came to his mind after winning the World Cup and representing the country at the Under-19 level. Do you think there is a problem of youngsters not realizing that Test cricket, as a lot of you guys grew up thinking, is the ultimate format of the game? Do you think there is somewhere down the line our youngsters who are coming through the ranks who feel that, as Arjuna was saying, if I bowl 4 overs or if I bat for 30 balls and score 60 runs, my job is done and I'll get that money?
I think they do. I think a lot of our Indian players do. Because I played a lot of domestic cricket for the last 3 years after I finished playing for India. I never got the opportunity of playing domestic cricket consistently. And when you speak to a lot of players, they realize that Test cricket is the important part of cricket, because that's when you're playing for India. And when you play IPL, you don't play for India. You play for Rajasthan, Calcutta, Mumbai, Delhi, Pune, whatever names you take. I think what IPL does to a lot of young players is gives them recognition. You know, you score runs in domestic cricket, because in the past there's been lots of first-class players who scored heaps of runs in domestic cricket and never played for India. But these boys know that if I play first-class cricket in Ranji Trophy, I get runs, and I have a good season of IPL, I get noticed by the selectors. And I think what IPL does is creates a platform for young players to be noticed at that level. And then if you do well against the best, say for example a young 22-year-old gets a 30-ball 60 against a Dale Steyn or a Callis or a Morkel, the selectors will stand up and notice that, listen, he can play fast bowling at the top level. So it doesn't guarantee success at the test level or the one-day level, because actually when you look at T20 cricket at the international level, there are about 4 or 5 games in a year. T20 cricket has become very popular because of IPL and other franchise league-based cricket all around the world. It's not the international T20s which has made it popular. It's only one World Cup maybe in 2 years, which could become 4 years from the next season. So I think IPL gives a platform and a visibility to a lot of young players, which is not always possible in domestic cricket, because, you know, when I was young playing first-class cricket, I've seen a lot of great successful domestic players, and I can take guys like Raman Lamba, Ajay Sharma, Arun Lal, Ashok Malhotra, Brijesh Patel, who did play a bit of test cricket, but have scored heaps of runs in domestic. The spinners like Rajinder Goel and Padmakar Shivalkar, who's got 500, 600 Ranji Trophy wickets, have not succeeded at that level. But what IPL does is gives you instant recognition and a belief that I can get Jack Callis out or a Dravid out or get a 50 or 100 against Steyn, Morkel, or even Muthaiya Muralidharan.
Brian, Arjuna also spoke about the value of test cricket. Do you think West Indies cricket has had a problem in that department for a number of years, especially since the advent of a lot of professional IPL leagues all over the world? I'd use the term mercenary cricketers, some of them prioritizing playing in these IPL, in the T20 leagues around the world, rather than represent the West Indies.
First of all, the fabric of West Indies cricket started to soften up in the beginning of the 90s, you know, with the resignation of guys like Sir Vivian Richards, Gordon Greenidge, Desmond Haynes, and I believe that we laid no foundation at all. There was no structure in West Indies cricket for us youngsters at the time to benefit from it and to carry on the legacy. So maybe spiraled downwards from even those days, and obviously each player now started to look, you know, at their own game selfishly and just wanted to be in the team, not necessarily a winning team, but just to be in the team to make a living. Up comes the IPL, up comes the franchise cricket, and these young players with no real background and understanding of what West Indies cricket meant, you know, scattered in different directions to play. They wanted to make a quick living. West Indies cricket was not as potent or as important to them as in the past, and they saw the IPL and all the different leagues as something that they can do around the world and not necessarily play test cricket. That is huge as far as I'm concerned in terms of, you know, not having a value of what cricket is all about in the West Indies.
India in 2007 won the inaugural World T20. After that, they went on to become the #1 test side in the world, and within a span of 4 years from winning the World T20, they went on to win the 50 overs format of the games. That's pretty much the hat-trick that they completed within a span of 4 years. Do you think, now that the West Indies has won a T20 World Cup, do you think they can go on and go from strength to strength as far as the overall development of the game is concerned in the Caribbean?
I believe that the infrastructure placed in India is not there in the West Indies. And you would see sporadic performances like you saw in the T20 World Cup, where, you know, we won that. But to say that there's going to be a consistent performance from the team that has to build to become a test champion team, you know, it's not going to happen in 6 months' time. I don't believe that we have the infrastructure. I don't believe that we have what it takes at present to become world champions in all formats of the game. I don't place the responsibility or any of it on the players. I still believe that administratively we've got it wrong, and until we get it right, it's then going to take 5 or 10 years before we can see a team not as invincible as the team in the 70s and 80s, but a team that can compete with the best teams in the world and come out on top.
All right. I'm going to open up the debate now, and sitting amongst our midst, we have a former Indian cricketer, a former Indian opener, Akash Chopra. Akash, question from you. Can we have a mic to Akash here? He's in the front row here.
Rahul, this one is for you because you mentioned that defensive technique may just become passé, and batsmen are going to play in a different mold altogether, which will make cricket entertaining. That's what we saw with Shikhar. That's what we see with a lot of other cricketers. But does the advent of or overconsumption of T20 cricket has a negative impact on the development of young spinner? Because I think he has to remold his or realign his way of operating the most when it comes to bowling in the shortest format. Test cricket, you need a different skill set. T20, I think you need a completely different skill set. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you in some respects there. I think even though actually in T20 cricket, it's the spinners who are probably the most successful, bowlers. If you look at economy rates of most IPLs that we've played over the last 5 years, you'll see it's actually the spinners who have the best economy rates. But it's different kinds of spin bowlers. It's your Sunil Narayans, it's Daniel Vittori, people bowling a lot flatter. Yes, that is definitely a concern, especially more and more T20 or shorter format cricket that's played at a young age will definitely hamper spin bowling in terms of the classical spin bowling that you would say gets you wickets in test match cricket. And that is a big challenge that coaches, administrators, captains face across all levels of how do we preserve that skill of spin bowling, which is your classical loop flight, an ability to spin the ball rather than sort of spinners focusing on bowling darts and bowling different kinds of variations and different kinds of balls. So that is a challenge that's going to take a lot of courage and patience somewhat from captains, coaches at various junior levels to have the courage to play these kind of spinners. But it is a concern. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
And Dada, following on from that concern, to put a personality to that concern, Harbhajan Singh, do you think it's something that's affected his game as well? Because we've seen him struggle over the last 3-4 years, just like Virendra Sehwag.
I think what also matters is having confidence on the player. And if you look at Virendra Sehwag and Harbhajan Singh, they've been in and out of the team. And you look at how they played in the first 2 years when IPL has just started, and then you see now. Because I feel, especially for someone like Sehwag, he's a sort of a personality or a player who needs support rather than the sword dangling on his neck all the time. There's no doubt that his performance has tipped over a period of time because he set such high standards for himself at the first 6-7 years of his career. But I also feel that when you are around an international cricket for such a long time, you will go through this phase of 1 or 2 seasons where you struggle, where you don't get runs as much as you've set your standards, and then suddenly you get back to doing well again. And I think you need a captain, you need people around you or selectors to help you through that period. It's happened with everyone. And when you play for 14, 15 years or maybe 20 years, it's not possible to be consistently at the top for such a long time. And I think especially with Harbhajan, yes, Viru has been playing consistently, but with Harbhajan being in and out of the side hasn't helped him. And it could happen to the best when you realize that you've been your premier spinner for a good period of 10, 12 years, and suddenly you're finding, struggling to get a place in the team, and even if you're bowling 18 overs in a test match, you're not the frontline spinner. This is something works at your mind because cricket is such a mental game.
Okay. Noted television personality and a cricket commentator and host is also amongst our midst, Mandira Bedi. I believe you also have a question for our esteemed panel.
Firstly, thank you for calling me a commentator. I'm not one. I've just been a cricket presenter. We have 4 very great captains in our midst, so my question would be to anyone who'd like to take it. We're talking about the changing face of world cricket. How do you think the role of the captain has evolved over these years? Because it's now no longer about managing players on the field, it's about managing egos, managing the media, mentoring players. So lots has changed over the years, and what do you see the role of a captain now, say from when you were captain, Arjuna?
I think for me, captain is the boss. I always felt that when you are a leader, you should lead from the front. I'm not talking about the performances. When you have your players, you need to trust them. What Sourav said earlier about Sehwag, any top cricketer can go on a bad run. It has happened to all of us. But you need to have the faith on that particular cricketer with the selectors. You need to educate the selectors. Some of the selectors doesn't realize what sort of value that particular player can have. So those are the issues we went through when I was captaining. But I always felt that when you are a leader, you take in charge in the middle or even outside. You control the players, you educate the players, and you need to know about the players. I went through a really tough time when I took over the captaincy. I was a very young guy. I was about 23 when I first took over the captaincy, but it was a pretty difficult time. But I was blessed by some of the seniors who was surrounding me. But when I took over the captaincy for the second time, I always felt, I always wanted to be, the players to be comfortable and players to trust me as a leader. And I always knew that if I'm going to look after them, they will produce results. That's what happened to all of us. And I know that there are, when we were playing, it was one manager, one coach. I think that's it. Now they have about 9 or 10. I'll be the last person to have 10 guys in the dressing room with 15 players. I might have a different room for the others because the dressing room is for the players. Even for the coach, I always felt the coach job is not in the dressing room. It should be outside the dressing room. Coaching part, maybe planning. I think most of the planning has been done by the captain. I'm sure that all the captains will agree with me. I have gone through a lot of coaches, but for me, most of the senior cricketers, we sit and discuss how to get players out, how to go about it. And the coach's job is to get you to the net, get you right, put you back in the field. And that's the job I adopt. I always felt that I was pretty successful.
And what do you see the role of the captain today? How much that's changed over the years?
I still feel that it should be the same. I'm sure most of the captains are more keen on taking the second part. I always felt there are captains who are not that aggressive. It's a nature by players. Like you take some of the players like Mahela Jayawardene, he's not that aggressive. Even Dhoni looks the same. But take Gangulis or Ranatungas, they were different in the field. So sometimes you need to adopt that, especially when you're playing against Australia or some other countries. And I think that was a success some of the top captains had.
Can I quickly add to that? Since we've spoken of coach, there's so much talk of younger coaches. We hear about it, read about it in the papers, but yet the two gentlemen sitting over here who most recently retired from the game, why is it that we don't have a young coach, someone who's just retired from the game, because he knows the strengths and weaknesses of the team, knows the team inside out. So I'm sure there have been feelers that have come, both your ways. Why don't we see a young coach? Why don't we see a coach that's just retired from the national side, take over as...
Right. Who wants to take that out of you two first?
I am younger than Sourav, so by a little bit only. So no. I think you do see young coaches. I mean, if you look at across the world, there are coaches. Generally, there are sort of younger coaches coming through the ranks and coming through the system more and more now. I think, with anything, I think once you finish playing, a little bit of time away from the game and an opportunity, I think, sometimes to get a chance to look at the game from a different perspective, to see, sit back and to be able to look at a game. I think sometimes when you're playing cricket, you're caught up in the cocoon of playing cricket all the time, and you live in a very surreal world sometimes. And just having that time a little bit away from the game and being able to look at it and you look at it sort of dispassionately will help. But yeah, I think in time you will see more and more younger coaches coming through and coming coming along. Gary was pretty young when he sort of coached us. I think Gary was 42, 43 when he coached us. He'd finished playing for about 4 or 5 years from international cricket. So, Yeah, I mean, to each his own and each board its own. I think in the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you're young or old. I think, you got to pick the best coach that you think will work for your particular team. Sourav Ganguly, I answered my question.
Dada, do you feel you're young enough?
I would want him to coach. I'll put it that way. Yeah, why not? See, the biggest challenge someone like him who will face is because he's just finished playing. And being a coach, it's 9 months on the road. And when you have a young family, he's got 2 boys, I've got a girl who's 11 years old, it gets very difficult to be on the road again for 9 months. So that's a major part of the decision which stops you from doing it. You want to do it because it gets you back on to do something which you love the most, which you've enjoyed doing all your life. But that decision you will have to make, and I agree with Rahul that give it a break for 4 or 5 months and 4 or 5 years, and then when an opportunity comes, you do the job. But at the present moment, Fletcher's got an extension, so we can all shut up.
But you've had those few years, though.
Sorry?
You've had those few years to sit back and reflect.
I was still playing IPL, so I was still hitting some sixes, some easy runs, and some easy money.
All right, so you heard it first here. Rahul, Dada's still going to be playing the IPL this season. All right, I'm going to open up the floor to the audience here as well. Lots of hands going up. I'm pretty sure I won't be able to get to all of you, but yes, the gentleman right here. Can we have a mic for him, please?
Earlier this week, we saw a very disturbing first of its kind, I guess the world of discipline, or a very poignant first, when Michael Clark took a very strong stance, Mickey Arthur and Michael Clark. All of you have been captains. I want to hear from all of you. What would you have done?
Brian, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think I have the most...
I like the laugh on Brian's face.
the most rebellious team to captain. I most likely had to send the whole team home. But I believe that, first of all, looking at it as a player, if my captain and coach have a certain strategy to get something out of us, I believe as a player you have to participate. And not participating is sending a message. And not the sort of message you want to send in between a series that you're not doing well. But in saying that, if I put on the captain's hat, I believe that it's something that you could maybe handle away from the scene, okay, that this particular thing happened that evening, the guys did not pitch up with what we wanted from them, take them aside and talk to them. I think it's very important to keep your team. And what you don't want to do, you don't want to actually tell the world what's going on. You want to be able to handle it as a team, ensure that the guys understand what you wanted to achieve, and see if you can eventually get it out of them. As I said, the team that I captained in the late 90s right through to the end of my career is rebellious. And, I've had many, many occasions where, you'd love to send a guy home, put him on the first plane back, but you can't. And you just believe that there are different ways of doing things. And I definitely would have dealt with that in-house and have my best team on the field.
Arjuna, you were a captain who wasn't afraid to speak his mind. How would you have dealt with the situation?
I personally feel they handle it very well. I think you need to understand that when you are representing a country, the entire nation, not 15 of, not the 15 cricketers. You are representing the entire nation. You are responsible for these 20 million people back home as Sri Lankans. I always feel that discipline has when you are in the team. Because when you tour for 30 days or 60 days, but that's a job you do. You are paid for that. If you don't know how to handle it, as far as I'm concerned, you are out of the team. I think that's the way I have adopted. I personally feel if the captain can take that decision, I'm sure the way it handles is the criteria. I think the Australians handled it pretty well. They gave the proper picture. The younger guys saw what's happening, and I'm sure none of the younger guys will never get into that hereafter. It has happened to us, but we handle it in a different way, maybe without the media knowing, without the country knowing. There were players who has gone back home without no one knows. So it's different Like when it happens in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka or Bangladesh, it's totally different. But for Australia or England, it's not a big thing. I think the way they handle it was pretty good. But if we do the same thing, I'm sure sometimes the media might go after you, or some of the TV stations will go after you. But I personally feel the way Australians, hats off to them.
All right, more questions from the crowd. But before I see those hands at the back, I'm going to come to you guys. But before that, I have to go to my own boss, Rahul Dravid, the managing editor of Headlines Today. He's been trying to catch my attention as well. So Rahul, over to you first.
My question is on this business of conflict of interest, and I want to ask all of you, starting with Rahul Dravid. Former selector Mohinder Amarnath said he couldn't drop Mahendra Singh Dhoni when he was going through a bad patch because of pressures of the IPL franchisee being owned by a man who's also the BCCI president. I believe that's very dangerous to have a situation where you can't drop a player because there are commercial considerations at play. Do you think that Indian cricket, if it has to go forward, should immediately end this nonsense of conflict of interest? That you can't be in charge of a team, owner of a team, and also at the same time be the man who's framing all the laws. I want to ask that first to Rahul, and then we'll take it one by one.
Look, I mean, that's the BCCI constitution, and the BCCI allows you to do that. You know, I think the BCCI allows you to do that, so that's where we are, and that's the situation. As to how an individual deals with it, I think, you know, if Shrikant wanted, look, if Shrikant
allows it, the question is, do you think it needs to be stopped? Do you think it's okay?
I let that pass, honestly. I let that pass because there are complexities. There are complexities with that, with the answer. There's no yes and no answer to that.
So let's hear your argument.
Yeah, no, the complexities to that would be, from the way I sort of see it and read it, when the IPL was started, there weren't many people bidding for IPL teams, you know. It allowed the BCCI office bearers, or in this case, India Cements, to actually have a team. Nobody knew whether Mr. Srinivasan was going to become a president in the future. Nobody knew how big the IPL was going to become. So the rules have been framed. No one has gone against the rules of the system.
My question is simple. Do you think it's okay? Do you think it needs to be put to an end? You're explaining the past complexity and the context. My question is straight. Do you think conflict?
I'm not in a position to make that decision, Rahul. So, I mean,
outside the off stance.
I don't need to cross that bridge because I'm not at that bridge. I'm not in a position to change that.
Okay,
Me saying anything here is not going to make a difference. So I'll when I reach the bridge and I'm in a position to do something, I'll answer that question.
Okay, before Dada answers, let's hear from the outside. Let's hear from Arjuna Ranatunga.
I'd like to hear Dada.
We'll come to Dada. Before Dada likes to fish around outside the offside, so let's see what he does with it. No, first Arjuna.
I think for me, country comes first. Any player should realize that they are involved in IPL or franchises because they are playing for the country, they have done well for the country. We went through the same thing. I have to say that Lasith Malinga, he was planning, he said that he was injured while playing the IPL. Then the cricket board wanted him to come back to Colombo. Then straight away he said, I'm not going to play test cricket here after I'm retired. And this is a guy who has been fed from the start and brought into a different level, from the paracetamol up to the top thing spent by the cricket board, all government money, all cricket board money. And he comes and tells us, no, I'm not going to play test cricket, I'll be concentrating on IPL and 2020. I don't think that is right. Unfortunately, I was not involved at that time. If I was involved, I will never see him playing cricket again for the country, because country comes first. If you feel that country is second and the franchises are on top, I'm going to say I feel very sorry for Indian cricket.
You think there is a problem with conflict of interest?
Absolutely.
That's nice. You give an outside perspective to it. Let's hear from Brian Lara.
You already had the outside perspective there.
What is your take? Do you agree?
I believe definitely country comes first, and you've got to keep your performance up, playing for your national team, and everything else will fall into place. And if you're such a big draw that people are considering having you on with your performances low, I think there's a problem with that.
But Dada, this is a really big problem. Former cricketers, stalwarts, often find it difficult to express themselves because of commercial considerations, because they're now part of the same BCCI mix. So you or Rahul might not tell us what you really think is good or bad for cricket, because it's happened with Gavaskar, it happened with Ravi Shastri, because you're part of the mix. So therefore we won't ever get to hear a frank opinion on whether there's a problem with conflict of interest or not.
No, there is two ways of looking at it, Rahul. I think somebody like Rahul Dravid or Sachin Tendulkar, there's been such big names in Indian cricket. It's always not possible for them to criticize Indian cricket all the time, and that's not right, because Indian cricket is here because of what we did on the field and also what the administrators did off the field, because that's also a tough job, to keep Indian cricket going. I'll tell you one thing, in the early 90s or the middle 90s, we would go to countries like England and Australia. We would stay not the best of hotels, get the tough part of the tours, and with all due respect, not looked after well. But I've seen a massive change since the year 2000.
My question is on conflict of interest.
Yes, I will come to that. No, I will come to that. And I have a massive change with the way we got treated after that. And it's just improving every time. So you got to give credit to people who run the board at different stages to take Indian cricket this way, not only just cricket-wise, but the way the players are treated. And with conflict of interest, it's possible, it's not possible, it's just the way you look at it. Still being the president of BCCI, you can let the national team run on its own. Yeah, we are coming to this conclusion because obviously India hasn't fared well in the last
But this is an anecdotal instance Mohinder Amarnath cited, that they couldn't together drop Dhoni because of the presence of N. Srinivas. And that's deeply disconcerting.
See, it could also be a belief that this man can take Indian cricket forward. And with due respect, we've had conversations among us because we've played together for such a long time, and we've had different opinions. He felt something else, I felt something else, and these are completely different opinions. And it's honest. It's not that I'm on this stage and trying to cover up everyone. We've had discussions in the Tour of England when India weren't performing, and I had a different opinion. I felt that somebody should be captaining one format of the game, and I've said that on television, where he felt, no, he's the best man to take Indian cricket forward. So everybody will have different opinions, and I still feel that being at the top, you can still let Indian cricket run on its own. And if you look at something which has happened yesterday, it is the reinstating of Duncan Fletcher for another 1 year, which also makes us feel that he'll go on till the 2015 World Cup. So the faith has not just been shown to Dhoni, whether rightly or wrongly, whether India's poor performance or not so good performance, but it has also been shown to Duncan Fletcher as well, where all of us believe that probably they need somebody new to take this team forward. So there has been some consistency in backing someone.
So you're okay with conflict of interest?
As long as you do... Yeah, as long as Rahul, you run it properly. You can be the head of two different institutions and still run, run independently. I think that's possible. It's just the way you look at it.
I don't know if this makes sense, but drawing an analogy with football, David Beckham was the face of England's 2012 Olympic drive. And he was available for the Olympic team. And, I could put my head on a block that David Beckham was going to be selected for the work that he'd done off the field on the Olympic team. I mean, he's still very fit. But the people that were selecting the team at the end of the day felt that they needed this particular team. David Beckham was not a part of the setup. And a lot of people in England were upset. But I believe that they made the choice of picking the best possible team for that particular Olympics. I don't know if that makes sense.
Add to what I said earlier, Rahul, I think we were brought up in a different culture. I think playing for the country was the most important thing as far as we were concerned. I think as a schoolboy, we dreamt to play for the country wearing the blazer or the cap, but it's totally changed now. I think it's all about, I'm not saying all the players, majority of the players are more concerned about the financial aspect rather than the glory for the country. I think that's the only area where I get hurt sometimes when you go through some of these cricket games.
All right. One final question, ladies and gentlemen. Gentleman right here. Can we have the mic for him, please?
Okay, my question will be to Rahul because he's my all-time favorite. It's about the commercialization of cricket, which everybody keeps talking about. And when it comes to the money that you guys make, I hope you make lots of money every time because you win us World Cups, and that's great. But when you hear about now there's going to be test cricket under lights as well, then you wonder that are cricketers going to be reduced to being entertainers to just come out and perform under lights? Will there be a limit? What do you think? Would there be a limit for you as a sportsman? Is the sport slipping out of your hands?
Rahul?
Well, I think the move, and it's a move in the future, I'm not sure whether it's even a possibility because of, for starters, the quality of the cricket ball. To play cricket in the night, the move is really to hopefully get more and more people to come and watch Test cricket. I think what you're finding today is that people aren't really coming to watch Test cricket because of the pressures that they face at work and the difficulties of taking leave, on a working day. So I think that's the sort of move behind trying to, in the future, play cricket in the night. So it's a convenient time for people to be able to come and watch. So I think in the long run, if all things are equal, and I think it's not a bad idea. Commercialization, I think in itself is not necessarily a bad word. For starters, Brian spoke about facilities and infrastructure not being there in the West Indies and not being available to their players, and he's right. You see incredible talent in the West Indies, but I've toured the West Indies, and I think it's some of the most difficult places to play cricket in because the practice facilities in the West Indies are nowhere near or up to the mark as you find in other places in the world. And this is for an international cricket team. So it's all the more creditable for people like Brian from the kind of setup that they've come in to what they've achieved because of the lack of infrastructure and facilities. What commercialization and money does, and has definitely done that in India today, is that at the IPL, the money coming into the sport has ensured that facilities have improved across the length and breadth of this country. If you look at all the young cricketers coming into India today, whether it's a Mahendra Singh Dhoni from Ranchi, a Harbhajan Singh from Jalandhar, a Virendra Sehwag from Najafgarh, all the young kids coming today, most of the young kids are coming from smaller towns, cities, which would have been unthinkable 2 decades ago because there were no facilities in this place. I come from Karnataka and Bangalore, and I know that a lot of the money that we get from the BCCI, from all this commercialization, from all this money that comes from the IPL, is actually plowed back into facilities, into nets, into equipment in places like Bijapur, Tumkur, Raichur, small towns which had no chance, young kids had no chance to have access to cricket balls, bats, turf wickets. All these things are changing. And I think that's a great positive of commercialization, money coming into the sport. There are challenges with commercialization, but there are also a lot of positives. And more money that's come into sport has meant that we find the Indian team today is actually a true reflection of the diversity of this country and a true reflection of this country as a whole, and not just cricketers from big towns and big cities.
All right, I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. Completely, utterly out of time on this discussion. Thank you so much for being here, all of you, Rahul, Dada, Brian, and Arjuna. Thank you so much.